Right, hello Year 10. This is a task which I think is probably the most useful thing you can do when it comes to revising history, and one of the best ways of consolidating what you've learned throughout the whole course. Okay, so it won't take me too long to explain. Okay, and believe me with this, it won't actually be much writing for you guys at all, but it will be quite a lot of thinking time and possibly some research too. So there's nothing new, but it's a great way of trying to think about what you'd put for loads of different question types. Okay, and I've got these sort of grids for every aspect of history that we look at. So without further ado, let me just share my screen with you. So when you download the sheet from from Show My Homework or from Google, then what you'll see is a grid like this. Okay, now it's really important that you understand the grid before you start attempting to do it. Okay, so you'll see there's a whole range of questions. Now don't panic, I'm not going to get you to write anything out in full. Okay, it's loads of little notes, and what we'll do is we'll cover lots of different types of subtopics within Elizabeth and lots of different question types. So the first thing to get your head around is that when it comes to Elizabeth and paper 2, there are only 3 questions, and they'll be worded exactly how you see them there. The 4-mark question that you see there on the top left will start every single time with describe 2 features of. Okay, and then if you go down that column, you can see there describe 2 features of Elizabethan society, describe 2 features of Elizabethan education, describe 2 features of the role of the church in daily life. Okay, so all I want, well, I'll show you in a minute how much to write for that, but literally it's 4 marks. It will take you 2 minutes in the exam. You just need 2 things about that, about what it asks for. Okay, any 2 things, and I'll give you an example in a minute. The second column along is explain why. So again, every single question in that column will start with explain why. So the top one, explain why Elizabeth faced problems when she became queen in 1558, and it goes down and so on and so forth. Explain why exploration increased in the early Elizabethan period. So again, because with that question we want 3 reasons, you'll put 3 separate reasons in this in these 3 boxes. Okay, so it gets us used to thinking about how we'd answer the question. We're not actually going to answer any questions. We're going to write down how we'd approach it and what we'd put in each paragraph. And the final column on the right hand side is the 16 marker. Okay, so for this one you'd have 5 paragraphs, well actually 4 because you wouldn't have an introduction, but we're going to put what we'd put in there for the 3 main paragraphs. So for example, it will always end with how far you agree, and there'll always be a statement beforehand. So how it will read is something like this: religious divisions were the main problem facing Elizabeth in 1558. How far do you agree? And then again, if you go down the column, you'll see there's lots of different types of questions. So that's how it'll look to you when you download it. So whether you want to write the questions out, use it as a Word document, copy and paste it, whatever you want to do, it's up to you. Now, I've got a version here that I've just made bigger, and I'm just going to show you just how little I want you to write for each row. Okay, now don't worry, as you look at it, the rows don't all, it's not all in the same part of Elizabeth. You can see here we've got the settlement, Mary Queen of Scots, and then the Armada. But what you do, once you've done the whole grid, you'll realise we cover the whole course again, and these are all questions that have either been used in past exams or have been published by the exam board in either textbooks or revision guides. So these are the ones that could highly likely be used. So you can see here, describe 2 features of the religious settlement. So all I've put there is 2 features: one, the act of uniformity, and one, the act of supremacy. Okay, remember the act of uniformity was that all church services and all churches had to look the same, and the act of supremacy was that it made Elizabeth supreme governor of the church. So again, that would be 4 marks, but we're just writing down the 2 things you talk about. The explain why question. So explain why Mary Queen of Scots created a problem for Elizabeth when she came to England in 1568. So you want 3 separate reasons. Okay, so I put down 1 is that she had links with France because she used to be married to King Francis of France. Second one was she was actually next in line to the throne, and the fact that she used to be married to a guy called Lord Darnley, who himself had a distant claim to the throne, meant that she was more of a threat, and that she was next in line because Elizabeth did not have an heir. And the third reason is because Mary had a child with Francis who was called James, and again, the English public liked the fact that she had an heir so that they could have some continuation. So again, three separate reasons, but I don't want you to write much more than that for each one, okay? And it can be a bit less. I just want to see what you would put in each paragraph. And the final bit there, poor Spanish tactics were the main reason the Armada failed. How far do you agree? If you can, try and put down 1 agree and 2 disagree, okay? Or 2 agree and 1 disagree. It's up to you. In the mark scheme, you can agree with it 3 times. You can disagree with it 3 times, but I think it's good practice to try and get a balanced argument. So I've said, yes, I agree to some extent because it was an ambitious plan trying to link together the Armada at Calais along with Parma's army, always meant that something might go wrong. However, you can disagree and say that the Armada failed because of poor leadership. So the Duke of Medina was a last-minute choice, and he also suffered from seasickness. Or you could also say, I also disagree because of the weather. Without the weather, the fire ships that were launched by Lord Howard would not have gone towards the Armada. And when the retreating Spanish ships were going home, it was what blew them against the rocks in northern Scotland and on the Irish coast. So that's one row filled in. You guys have to do that for the rest of them, okay? But like I said, I'm not after lots and lots of writing, just want to see what you put. There's also, obviously, you can be wrong with these, but there's not just 3 right answers or 3 right answers here or 2 right answers for features. There are lots of different correct answers. So when I mark it, I'm not simply going to give you a mark out of 10 for how neat it is or for handing it in. What I'm going to give you is a mark out of how many questions there are on here, okay? And then hopefully you all get them all right, but where you don't get them right, I'll send it back and get you to rethink about it. So it's a dead useful task, okay? I highly recommend this. So please give it a go. And if you get stuck, give me a shout. What I would recommend is try it first without using your notes and without a guide or a textbook or online. Just see how many you get. Even if you just get 2 or 3 questions out of the whole grid, it's just picking up on your long-term memory, and they can go in and fill in the gaps. Right, guys, as usual, take care, and I will speak to you again soon.